It's me. I'm here. It's all the news that's fit to podcast or something like that on Hack Naked News this week. I'll be joined by the amazing and sexiest guy in Utah, Jason Wood. And so stay tuned and we'll cover the news with Hack Naked.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show that brings you the security news each week. And despite popular belief, we do wear pants. It's Hack Naked News.
Most of the organizations I work with, they have
released. Yes, you read it.
Actually do.
The original Linux kernel security with Linux.
So I hope everybody has their resistance built up.
Brought to you by. Make sure your team is prepared to fight off the latest cybersecurity threat. IT Pro TV is the resource to keep you and your IT team skills up to date. You can stream IT Pro TV's courses live and on demand worldwide, so there's no need to send staff to off-site training. Their team solution provides access to a supervisor portal for full control over your team's training schedule and group analytics. Go to itpro.tv/hacknaked and use the code HN30 to try it free for 7 days and receive 30% off your monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. To learn more about IT Pro TV's team solution, sign up for a free demo of their supervisor portal. Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending these assets? Have you penetration tested these public assets? Start 2017 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night.
Go to itpro.tv/hacknaked and use the code HN30 to try it free for 7 days. You know you want to. And receive 30% off your monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. To learn more about IT Pro TV's team solutions, sign up for a free demo of their supervisor portal, although it says Prottle. And now, the security news with me, Doug White, and I'm also joined by Jason Wood. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Doug. How's it going?
Oh, pretty good. I survived Wild West Hacking Fest somewhere on here.
I saw your fancy
fun.
T-shirt.
Well, yeah, I got a fancy T-shirt that's got sponsor names on it. I even have my Trevor Forget shirt in there. And if you watched SDL, I was wearing that. But it was fun. They had all the big shots there and me. But it was pretty cool. So, how's everything going with you?
Good. I was not one of the big shots out there either, so.
Well, there was a lot of weeping and crying and things because you weren't there. So it was people kept coming up and just said, "Where's Jason?" Oh God! But yeah, well,
wow, people are desperate.
I know they missed you so, but maybe next time. All right, so let's talk about the news. My first story is, despite the benefits, new devices will lead to new security risks, and the presence of malicious code on the IoT is now very much a reality. Wow, I guess that's not really news, but more IoT stuff. So there's an article where they were talking about IoT spending, and I'm very interested in IoT because really when I sit down and I think about it, to me that's like I was talking to some people the other night about IP addressing and how way back when in IPv4, we were talking about they'll never run out of all these addresses, and then all of a sudden IPv6 came around, and now they were saying it's 340 undecillion addresses or something like that, and it sounds like it's an infinite number almost, but it's not. And Internet of Things starts to really create a world where I think there's going to be some problems in terms of how many of these devices are out there and how they're managed. And because they're all networked, we end up in a problem. And I know you guys have all heard this stuff many times. But IoT spending is set to reach about $1.7 trillion by 2021, according to this article. And all this then brings right back to why is IoT a threat? And the number one thing that they concluded, which I could have told them, but they didn't ask, was code signing. And code signing is something that's not done enough. but even code signing won't protect you if you have exploits, if the code is poorly written, and we see that over and over again where an idea or a protocol is solid, but it gets exploited anyway because somebody didn't code it properly, they didn't build it properly. So probably the biggest things that I sort of have in my IoT worry file is, one, the volume of IoT devices, managing IoT devices at a board level almost, where you've got things running on chips, you've got code, you've got whatever's inside that device, and then who coded it. And so when you mix all those things together out in the world, all of a sudden your house is filled with this sort of swirling cloud of drones, because this is my personal dream, is that I have drones floating around me. So if I can have like 50 or 70, actually it would be a nice number, like 64 or 90, I don't know, 96, maybe 128 drones sort of floating around me that defend me from things or see what's going on, just keep me happy, then all of a sudden I start having problems with addressing, I have problems with exploits, I have problems with the code. And code signing was what they were talking about in this document. One of the things about code signing I don't like is that signing code just means somebody said, this is the code, and they hash it and they say, okay, it's hashed, it's good. But that doesn't mean it's good code. That just means it was signed. So I'm a little bit worried about that. And related to that then, another article was just, and this is really sort of what I want to talk about today. It was an article that said school board websites restored after hack by pro-ISIS group. So there's this group called Team System DZ that hacks public websites and replaces the websites with pro-ISIS propaganda. And it's like, okay, wow. But and I know this is not any great news for all the people watching this show, that websites get hacked, because they get hacked all the time. But basically what that led me to was what are we going to do on the federal side to try to defend all these systems? Because unlike private industry where resources are more, available, in the government sectors, as we go down the chain or the ladder or whatever you want to call it, rolling downhill, from the federal government to the state government to the local government to the city government to the school board, you get to a point in that sort of model where you start going, how will these people ever be able to defend themselves against all this stuff? And why would they? Because they have no resources to do it. So there's some concerns that when I see articles like this and things like this happening, I, being sort of from that public sector side of the table, start thinking about that federal, state, local disaster planning thing that came out of our plans when we were building up things like the Cyber Disruption Team, which is now called the Joint Cyber Task Force. And the Joint Cyber Task Force was set up just to deal with this, but we don't have a lot of good mechanisms then, in my opinion, in place to deal with this stuff at low levels, which led to this story that I have now. FERC proposes updates to the critical infrastructure protection standards for cybersecurity. And so I wanted to talk just for a minute about what that means. You're going to see in the next, 3 to 5 years, stuff coming out of the federal government. And FERC, if you don't know what it is, stands for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and they control natural gas, electricity, all these things that you hear people talk about all the time when they talk about threats. And I worry a lot about that, but not a huge amount. The news media worries about it a lot more. But FERC has started to issue standards for energy because they're concerned about these SCADA systems, about these back office systems that are sitting out there waiting to be attacked. And this is sort of in the same line with the local school board. If the local school board's getting taken out, and these things are all connected, because I've done a lot of consulting jobs that were tying this company or this city to this entity in the city and this police department and this fire department and the school and the high school and on and on and on. And what happened was they just don't have anything. And they're mostly sitting there wide open. And until some kind of regulation gets passed that tries to force those things to happen, and I know a lot of you don't like the idea of regulation, and I've heard that, and people write comments and send me nasty emails saying, Doug, don't advocate regulation. It's not going to stop this. But the truth is that FERC started passing these things that are called SIPs. I don't know if they're pronounced that way. They could be KIPs, I guess, like GIFs and GIFs. Yeah, please don't say GIFs. I know they said it was supposed to be that way, but I don't like it. But these SIPs are what they call NERC. You can tell you're dealing with the federal government or the military because it's like FERC, NERC, SIPs, and SIP, NERC, FERCs, and all those kind of things all work together to create this. But these SIPs are standards that they're starting to issue for electric companies right now. So the SIP that was issued, the Critical Infrastructure Protection, is called SIP 003. So if you want to read some of these, you can go out and the notes are on the site too if you want to check that out. But the SIP 003 is starting to address, and listen to this, it's really starting to pull that civilian side stuff that all of you are familiar with into that federal silo. And when that happens, one, it's going to mean a lot of jobs for all of us because it means that all those entities like the school board who don't have anything and don't have any controls in place are going to have to embed controls on their systems, which means they have to hire people. And whether it's hiring our sponsors, nicely, or it's hiring you, or it's hiring some company to do it, or they're embedding it internally, suddenly all of a sudden this becomes a real issue. And basically, if you want to read about this, SIP 002-009 is all the standards that they're putting in place. And I'm just going to summarize a couple of them for you because I want to tell you how much this sounds like something that we've seen happen in other industries during the past. One of the things that it requires is, and you may laugh, it's okay to laugh, it really is. You can sit back and just guffaw if you want to. It requires that these entities have a cybersecurity policy. I'll wait for the laughter to die down. And just okay, talk amongst yourselves. It requires that they have security leadership at the senior manager level. And this is stuff that all of us have been telling all these companies that we've consulted with for years and years and years that they need to have. And they go, well, that costs money and it takes stuff. And we're going to do it. So we'll just assign this guy to be the senior manager. It requires that they have some kind of information protection standards in place. So this is identify, classify, and protect kind of standards like you've seen coming out of a lot of other things. And lastly, on that one, it requires access controls be in place. All of this is just like COBIT standards, which were what was used in HIPAA. It's what was used in SOX, which is Sarbanes-Oxley. And when I first got involved in this, it was with HIPAA. And then later with Sarbanes-Oxley. And when I first started working with Sarbanes-Oxley, I showed a bunch of people, auditors, what COBIT was. So yeah, you can blame me for that. But COBIT became this framework that started getting implemented. And this was one of these things that was like the revolution to end all revolutions against publicly traded firms. They didn't like it, they hated it, but it was basically something that said you must do these very things that this SIP 003 is starting to advocate for companies in that circumstance. So the whole point of all this blather was essentially that you're starting to see things coming out of federal regulatory agencies directed at these public entities, and you're going to see more and more of that going forward for the next 2 to 5 years and on into the future. But you're going to see that ramp up, and we saw that in the private sector. So when I first got hired by a doctor's office because they said we don't know what HIPAA is, what it means, or what we should do about it, and when I later got hired by a company to do SOX, and the company was saying, we don't know what this is, we don't know what it means, and we don't know what to do about it. And all of a sudden, that became an industry standard, and all of a sudden, everybody was doing these very, very things. And so now you're starting to see that being pushed down into that silo of public assets. So that is pretty good stuff for all of us in terms of jobs, and it's good stuff because it's a good idea. Fake WhatsApp app fooled millions of Android users on Google Play. Wow. Did you fall for it? Well, the only reason I brought this story up was because I wanted to mention once again this idea of what's called puny code. And puny code, if you've never seen these kind of attacks, are essentially where you take a domain name, and with puny code, you take a domain name that you can embed Unicode characters in. And so replace a zero with a slash through it from the Scandinavian alphabet or whatever. But when it displays, it looks exactly like the original one. So because those Unicode characters don't display in the URL, it looks like a legitimate site, and it's a very, very good way to do this. Now, what happened on Google Play with this was another variant of this same attack. And essentially what they did was they took a website for a specific product called WhatsApp, and they actually put some Unicode characters at the end of that. And these were actually non-display characters, because if you don't know, there's all kinds of characters in the ASCII2 Unicode sets that are bells, stops, line returns, line feeds, and all kinds of things. And so what they did was they embedded a Unicode string at the end of it. So it's essentially invisible. And that means that if you went to that bad link, you probably got phished right then and there. So Google Play has put a bug bounty on this, trying to get people to trust them again, even though after they had this this malware kind of thing going on. Basically, the last one I have is the persistent threat of malware in this means that we need more code signing. Which, again, like I said earlier, code signing doesn't necessarily save you. It just means that the bad code that you're running was at least signed. But we could do things with that. Google teamed up with HackerOne to run these bug bounties, so it's certainly a chance for you to jump on board and pick up some of this money. I think they're paying $1,000 per bug that was identified and documented in there. And basically what they're looking for is anything that's related to like remote code execution and stuff like this, specifically on their Android devices. So those are just some of my stories for the week. Jason, as always, is ready to entertain us with the real news, and I know he's standing by eagerly waiting for me to shut the hell up. But so as I shut the hell up, I am going to cut to the amazing Jason Wood to tell us his side
Has your
of it.
network been breached? CyberReason can help you answer this question. CyberReason products hunt for threats within your network and eliminate them in real time. To CyberReason, real time means within seconds. Founded by former military hackers who don't play by the rules, they've built this experience into their platform. Harness ingenuity and imagination, not just code, to defeat attackers. CyberReason. Disrupt the adversary and let the hunt begin.
So, as I was saying when I was so rudely interrupted by these ads, I missed my cue there. Sorry, guys, but you know that happens. It's all the alcohol. We're going to hear now from Jason Wood, who is going to fill us in on his side of the story. Jason.
Hey, so good to be back here, and thanks for the introduction, Doug. So this commentary or article, I found is titled "Members of Congress Want You to Hack the U.S. election voting system." And I'm picturing Uncle Sam here with his finger out at us right here.
I can do that.
Yeah. So the idea here is bug bounties are catching on at the federal level. We've seen this with the Hack the Pentagon contest that occurred. And so now some U.S. senators have proposed a law that essentially codifies the requirement for a bug bounty program for the U.S. voting systems. And this law comes from the senators Martin Heinrich of New Mexico and Susan Collins of Maine. And they've drafted the Save America's Voting Equipment Act 2017, or SAVE, S-A-V-E. And this was released on Halloween, actually, October 31st, 2017. So it's the bill itself has three specific goals that they state in the beginning of it, as I was reading through the text. First off is to facilitate information sharing between the federal government and state election officials, which you would think we would already be able to do. But as we saw with some things with the information being shared from the last election and the whole bit, it seemed like that was kind of a new experience for everybody, and they weren't prepared for it. The bill also aims to preserve the security, or what there is of it, and independence of state voting systems. So one of the hot issues around anything that the federal government does around voting is people reply and say, hey, the federal government is trying to take over the state's ability to run elections. And so this bill aims to try and address that by preserving that independence. And then finally is where it establishes the Hack the Election, or cooperative Hack the Election program. So just a quick rundown on the bill itself. The first title or section, as it is called, lays out the requirements for the Secretary of Homeland Security to sponsor state election officials to receive actual security clearances so they can be sent classified information. And like I said, we had some confusion, I think, in how that was going to be distributed in the last election. And so it looks like to me, these senators, at least at the federal level, are trying to establish a way of, hey, we've already got folks who are ready to receive classified information and have been cleared. Now we can, build this mechanism for sending this information down. The second title, like I said, it appears to try and give the federal government influence over the state elections, but preserve some of the state's sovereignty, for lack of a better word, on how they control conduct their elections. This is where I expect to see a lot of the contention. If this bill comes up for debate, this is where this section here is where I expect to see people really argue over things. But the idea here is that the Secretary of Homeland Security is going to declare voting systems, now through law and stuff like that, to be critical infrastructure, and then provide some provisions for the states to opt into this program and receive the benefits that come from the bill. What are some of these benefits? Well, one of the primary ones is grant money, that as states need to upgrade and fix issues in their voting systems, they can receive money from the federal government to pay for that. Cost is always, like Doug said, cost is always something you run into. Hey, we don't have budget for that. So here's a way of sending some of that money down. But as a string that's required for that, to get access to that money, the states have to implement their voting systems according to, and they quote, recommended best practices, unquote, as detailed in Section 202 of the bill. So here we've got, kind of a little bit of the carrot hanging out here saying, hey, you want our money, or we've got money for you, but you have to do these things to receive it. Title III is where the bug bounty gets described. And the idea here is the Department of Homeland Security will create and run an annual competition called the Cooperative Hack the Election program, where people can come in and attack voting systems and voter registration systems. And the idea is, why do they have this annual? Well, they want to make sure that these systems aren't being used at the time heavily. So people can come in and compete to discover vulnerabilities inside these systems. Best vulnerabilities get some kind of award or prize or something like that, whatever that is, I guess, to be determined for whatever is deemed the most significant vulnerabilities discovered. And then this information gets shared down to the impacted vendors and states. And this is where that money under Title II comes into play, right? We found all these issues. Now here's how you apply for grant money to fix that.
That's exactly how they did the original sort of cyber police type stuff, which was by creating DOJ grants for police agencies who wanted to pursue cybersecurity or more likely digital forensics at the time. And it was very effective because it meant that these state entities could actually get federal dollars as long as they adhered to certain standards and got people certified. So, yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, it's not an unusual carrot for the federal government to use. They dangle some money out here with some strings attached to it. There are benefits that come from taking advantage of it, but the law is built around this proposed bill or proposed law is built around the idea that the states opt into it. But so if you want this money, there's some things you're going to have to do about this at the same time. One of the things that sounded interesting to me about this is, one, we've already had people looking at the security of voting systems down at DEF CON this last summer. We actually had a village set aside for attacking voting systems, and people found a number of flaws. I talked to some folks who were definitely not penetration testers who came away saying, wow, that was way easier than I expected. This is taking it a step further, right? We're going to formalize this into a federal program competition and with awards out there for participants. And one of the things that sounded kind of intriguing to me is, even though voting equipment varies from state to state, you do have overlap between the states. So you have one state that opts in, two states, let's say, that use the same equipment. One opts into this law and the other one doesn't. The state that opts in has their equipment tested, and all these vulnerabilities are discovered in it. That impacts state number 2 over here that did not opt into the program. Now they know, things are being noised abroad that they've got vulnerable systems, but they don't necessarily have any money to fix it because they didn't opt in, so they don't get the grant money. So it provides incentive for the states to participate. a little bit of a stick behind non-participation. If the bill comes up for debate, what I'd expect to see is the states are going to scream and holler that, and I'm saying states broadly here, it's going to vary from state to state, but they're going to scream about how the law is infringing on their sovereignty to conduct elections. The federal government is gaining influence over the voting systems and therefore the overall elections. And I suspect the vendors are going to provide some support to that because nobody likes to have somebody come out and say your baby's ugly. But the bill, if it passes, it reaches the point of passing, it will provide more influence over the states. I think it will generally improve the security of our systems. We've seen that as things get publicized and gets voters or consumers' attention, people start to feel a little bit awkward and like they obviously that they've done something that they shouldn't have, or have let some things slide. So they try and address that in some way. So hopefully that will provide some benefit to the overall security of the voting systems and that are out there. Leveraging the grant money to make that happen. I don't think there's many folks in security that are going to argue that voting systems are secure. So like I said, I really like the idea of the bug bounty. But if it does make it to debate, watch for the fireworks as the states and the vendors argue that this is going to make things less secure and it's federal takeover of the voting system and all that other stuff. But kudos to Senators Henrich and Collins for proposing this legislation.
Yeah, I agree. I will say that I think that was kind of the way the law enforcement thing was perceived as well. It was like the federal government trying to step in and force them to do things. But the reality was the sort of shaming of not doing it, and now our state doesn't have a computer crimes unit or a crimes against children unit. So maybe because of the intensity of the issue, it will force people to sort of be shamed and to apply for the grants, and hopefully that'll pass. So thank you, Jason, for joining us with that interesting report. I actually hadn't read that bill yet, so I'm going to have to go home and read that. Thanks all of you for watching this week on Hack Naked News. Be sure and tune in next time. Thanks.